So Simon, I came to your session at Centre Parks years ago and asked you about risk, and you pointed me this book, which you can't see, which is well, I don't know. It's called The Search for Value, and it relates. I asked you a question about risk, and you pointed to that book, which has got lots of equations in it. But I think the most useful thing it does is it shows that risk is in some ways a reciprocal of business value, of stock value. It's a direct relation.
Yeah.
So I know that you're a risk guy. What and thanks so much for sharing the research. I saw that risk analysis was an area of focus. I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Well, so the risk analysis in terms of this group, it was what are the major areas, and so the ones that were right at the very top were very much about people type stuff. So very much culture and cyber immunity, and lower down there was the concept of risk analysis. Now, from my point of view, when we start talking about risk analysis, I'm talking about value, I'm talking about things like capital flow, I'm using maps because I'm actually using the interconnections between the different components, because every line in a map is a bi-directional exchange of value, or I give money for a cup of tea or whatever, and risk itself is just another form of asset that flows in these sorts of maps. But in order to assess that, I've got to actually understand the landscape. And so I've got a fundamental problem is that I generally don't understand the landscape. So, without this sort of stuff, it's the same with the economic system. It's mostly sticking fingers in the air and having a good guess. It's exactly the same with sustainability. Scope 3, it's all estimation because we don't understand the components and the connections between them. So, I do like the risk management stuff, the risk analysis. I'm going to say, from my point of view, we've still got huge weaknesses in actually understanding the environments that we're actually operating. And until we do start to understand those, we're still going to be in the world of guessing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I suppose I was hoping that you'd talk about some technical framework or decision-making framework or ways of gathering information. What do you think about the large language models? Do you think they can help with risk analysis?
So I think, as I said at the beginning, I think there's a huge change between ChatGPT-4 and the multimodal form of ChatGPT, because now we can actually start having a conversation with them, and it's huge. It's as night and day. It's that sort of scale, and so I think there are. I'm already using them to help create maps and so forth of the space and starting to have conversations. I think we're still very early days. I think there's some real potential there once we get a handle on the landscapes, because we compete across multiple landscapes: territorial, technological, economic, political, and cultural landscapes. Only one of them, the territorial, do we have a handle on? Do we have maps and radars and all the rest of it and that sort of stuff? The other four, it's often, people talk about digital sovereignty. Well, where are your borders? Where are you going to compete or conflict with others, I should say? Where are you going to cooperate, collaborate? You can't answer those questions without actually understanding the landscape. We can do that in territorial. So we're lacking those basic things. So your question, can it help? I think we're getting there. We're starting to be actually able to have conversations outside of the world of text. And so I think that's a massive improvement. Does that answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks for sharing the research. Really interesting.
Oh, pleasure, absolute delight.
So Jim, the way I connect that, and I feel, again, I think we have a golden opportunity now to really make sense, is to connect risk, right, with other parts, to have that situation awareness, where in the past, risk at top level was a bunch of spreadsheets. Then you have a gap, then you had reality, then you might have maps. I think we now can start to be able to graph them out, connect them, create narratives, and then use the maps to drive behaviors, right? And to drive situation awareness. But it's the connectivity that is super important. Like, for example, do people understand the risks of what the decisions they're making? A project, doing a project, does it increase, does it decrease, does it maintain your risk? I think that was the thing that was always missing. When the exec make a decision, do they understand the ramifications of the decisions they're making, right? And I think that in the past was impossible. It was air gaps, right? It was spreadsheets or even system A and system B. Like Simon got this great picture of a company has 25 risk systems, right, or 100 systems or 1,000 systems. But I think we now have an opportunity to connect them. There's a bunch of technologies and processes and thinking that are converging. And but I feel the LLMs provide the connection dot between them that allows us to do translations in a way that in the past was impossible or required so much engineering cost that nobody could do it. So watch this space. I think it's really cool.